Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The old porch swing creaked a familiar rhythm, a sound as much a part of our summers as the cicada's buzz or the clinking of ice in sweet tea. I was out there, like I often was on those warm Carolina evenings, watching the fireflies begin their nightly dance across the lawn that Tom, my husband, meticulously kept. Tom was inside, probably engrossed in one of his history documentaries. We'd been married 35 years, Tom and I. A good marriage, solid, comfortable. Like a well-worn armchair, you know. You don't always notice it, but it's there, holding you. My brother-in-law, David, was the one who usually brought the spark to our quiet life, the unexpected firework in our calm summer sky. He was Tom's younger brother by a good 10 years, full of that restless energy that Tom had long since traded for a comfy recliner and a predictable routine. David was a charmer, always had been. Not in a sleazy way, mind you. It was more an infectious enthusiasm, a genuine interest in people that made you feel like you were the most fascinating person in the room when he talked to you. His laughter was quick and loud, and his eyes, a brighter blue than Tom's, always seemed to be sparkling with some untold joke or adventure. He'd been married to Sarah for about 5 years, a lovely girl, sweet and a bit shy, who seemed to adore his outgoing nature. Lately, David had been over at our place more often. He and Tom were tinkering with an old boat Tom had bought on a whim. Or at least that was the official reason. More often than not, Tom would get tired or distracted, and David would wander out to the porch where I was reading, or find me in the kitchen experimenting with some new recipe. He'd lean against the doorframe, arms crossed, and just talk. About his day, about some funny thing he'd seen, about his dreams for the little fixer-upper house he and Sarah had bought. And yes, he'd flirt. Not the heavy, suggestive kind. It was lighter than air, like a playful nudge. He'd compliment my lemon scones. "Melissa, you're a culinary genius. Tom doesn't know how lucky he is." Or if I'd changed my hair, he'd notice immediately, tilting his head with a smile. "Something's different. You look fantastic." It was innocent. I was sure of it. He was like that with everyone, almost. Just a little more so with me, it sometimes felt. Or maybe I just noticed it more. Maybe in the quiet hum of my settled life, his attentions felt like a bright, unexpected melody. I'm not a fool. I'm a woman who's seen a fair bit of life. I knew the difference between a harmless compliment and something more. And this felt harmless. Fun, even. It made me laugh, made me feel visible. Sometimes, when your children are grown and flown, and your husband is more interested in the Civil War than your new dress, you can start to feel a bit like part of the furniture. David's easy charm was like a little dusting cloth, wiping away some of that invisibility. Tom, bless his heart, never seemed to notice. Or if he did, he didn't mind. He trusted David, and he trusted me. And rightly so. I loved my husband. What I felt with David wasn't a threat to that. It was separate. A little pocket of sunshine that had nothing to do with the steady, reliable warmth of my marriage. The old boat project was dragging on, which meant more visits from David. One Saturday afternoon, Tom was napping, a regular weekend occurrence. I was in the garden, wrestling with a particularly stubborn patch of weeds, the sun hot on my back. I heard his footsteps before I saw him. "Need a hand, Melissa?" David's voice, cheerful as ever. He was already rolling up the sleeves of his plaid shirt, a smudge of grease on his cheek from the boat engine. "Oh, David, you don't have to. You've been working on that engine all morning." "Exactly," he said, grinning. "Time for some therapeutic weeding." Besides, Tom's snoring is rattling the windows. We worked side by side for a while, the silence comfortable, punctuated by the snip of my shears and the soft thud of uprooted weeds. The scent of damp earth and blooming roses hung heavy in the air. "Sarah and I are thinking about starting a family," he said out of the blue. His voice was quieter now, a different tone than his usual breezy chat. I paused, looking at him. He was staring at a dandelion he just pulled, twirling it between his fingers. "Oh, David, that's wonderful news." He gave a small, hesitant smile. Yeah, we think so. It's a big step. A little scary, you know." "I remember," I said softly, thinking of my own long-ago anxieties when Michael, my son, was just a hope and a prayer. But exciting, too. Sarah must be thrilled. "She is." He nodded. "We both are. Just, you know, you hope you can get it right." He tossed the dandelion aside and looked at me, that familiar sparkle in his eyes now tinged with something more vulnerable. "You and Tom did such a good job with Michael and Emily. They're great kids. They had their moments," I chuckled. "And we had ours. Nobody gets it perfect, David. You just do your best with all the love you have." He reached out and squeezed my arm gently, his hand warm and strong. "Thanks, Melissa. That means a lot, coming from you." It was a simple gesture, a moment of shared confidence. But it felt significant, deeper than the usual banter. The sun seemed a little warmer, the garden a little brighter. His innocent flirtation, as I'd always thought of it, suddenly felt like it was resting on a foundation of something much more substantial. A genuine, burgeoning friendship, and a shared understanding of life's big, scary, wonderful chapters. I had no idea then, of course, how tangled and emotional that particular chapter was about to become, or how a simple plastic stick from the pharmacy would throw everything into a dizzying new light. The way he looked at me that day, though, with gratitude and a touch of something I couldn't quite name, it stayed with me long after he'd gone back to wrestle with Tom's boat engine. It was the start of something, though I didn't know what. The weeks that followed had a different quality to them. David still came over, still helped Tom, still chatted with me on the porch. The playful compliments didn't stop, but they were layered now with that deeper sense of connection we'd found in the garden. He started asking me more questions about my own experiences raising Michael and Emily, little things, practical things, but also about the emotional landscape of parenthood. Sarah, he mentioned, was a little overwhelmed by all the advice books and websites. "She trusts you, Melissa," he said one afternoon as I poured him a glass of lemonade. "You're so calm and wise about it all." Calm and wise. I almost laughed. If he only knew the internal flurries I'd often felt as a young mother. But I understood what he meant. I had the perspective of hindsight now. "It's mostly about trusting your instincts, David," I told him, "and loving them fiercely. The rest sort of falls into place." He'd get this thoughtful look on his face then, like he was really absorbing every word. Sometimes I'd catch Tom watching us, a faint smile on his lips. I think he was just happy to see his little brother seeking advice, happy that David felt comfortable enough with me to open up. There was never a hint of suspicion in Tom's gaze, only affection. And why should there be? This was family. This was good. The boat, surprisingly, was starting to look less like a heap of junk and more like something that might actually float. Tom was genuinely pleased, giving most of the credit to David's persistence. They were planning to take it out on the lake for a test run in a few weeks. There was a lightness in our household, a sense of anticipation. Then, one Tuesday morning, I was tidying up our guest bathroom. We rarely had overnight guests anymore, not since the kids moved out, but I liked to keep it fresh. As I wiped down the counter, I noticed the small wastebasket was fuller than it should be. Probably just Tom tossing some old shaving cream can or something, I thought. I pulled out the liner to tie it up, and that's when I saw it. Tucked down amidst a few crumpled tissues, almost hidden. A pregnancy test. My heart gave a funny little jump. A pregnancy test? Here? In our guest bathroom? My mind raced. Michael and his wife, Jenny, lived 2 states away. Emily was backpacking through Europe for the summer. Neither of them had been home in months. It wasn't mine, certainly. Tom, don't be ridiculous, Melissa. So, who? My first thought, a sudden jolting pang, was Sarah. Had she been over? I didn't think so, not in the last few days. And why would she use our guest bathroom to take a pregnancy test and then just leave it there? It didn't make sense. I picked it up, my fingers a little shaky. It was one of those digital ones. I didn't even look at the little window. My gaze was fixed on the plastic casing, the familiar brand name. A wave of confusion and something else, something I couldn't quite identify, washed over me. Why was this here? David. The name flashed in my mind. He'd been here so often. He and Sarah were trying. Could it be? Had Sarah come over with him, feeling unwell, and used our bathroom, and then forgotten it? It seemed careless, not like Sarah. I stood there, in the quiet, sunlit bathroom, holding this little piece of plastic that suddenly felt like it held a world of secrets. The air seemed to crackle with unspoken possibilities. I thought of David's recent earnestness, his quiet questions, his hopeful, anxious eyes. Was this the answer he and Sarah had been waiting for? And why, oh why, was it in my wastebasket? The innocent flirtation, the easy camaraderie, the deepening friendship, all of it suddenly felt charged, freighted with a new and unsettling significance. I had a sudden, vivid image of David's face, his smile, and a tremor of something akin to fear ran through me. What if this wasn't as straightforward as I hoped? What if this little stick was about to complicate everything? I carefully placed the test back in the bin, pulling the tissues over it, as if hiding it could somehow delay whatever revelation it was about to bring. My own reflection in the mirror looked back at me, a little wide-eyed, a little pale. The comfortable rhythm of my life, the predictable creak of the porch swing, suddenly felt very far away. I had a feeling that whatever happened next, it wouldn't be simple, and it certainly wouldn't be predictable. The title of a yet unmade YouTube video flashed in my mind, absurdly. Asterisk my brother-in-law's innocent flirtation ended with a pregnancy test. You won't believe what happened, asterisk, except this wasn't a story for clicks and views. This was my life, and it felt like it was about to take a very sharp, unexpected turn. My mind was a whirlwind for the rest of that day. Every time the phone rang, I jumped. Every car that drove past our house made my breath catch. Was it Sarah coming to retrieve her forgotten test? Was it David, perhaps looking sheepish, to explain? I said nothing to Tom when he came home from his golf game, his face ruddy and cheerful. How could I? What would I even say? Tom, I found a pregnancy test, and I think it might belong to your brother's wife, but I'm not sure, and I'm feeling strangely agitated about it. It sounded ridiculous even in my own head. I tried to busy myself, making dinner, but my movements were jerky, my thoughts elsewhere. I kept replaying my recent conversations with David. His talk of starting a family, his vulnerability. Had there been clues I'd missed? Was this test a sign of joy or of more anxiety for them? If it was positive, why hadn't he said anything? If it was negative, why leave it here? The not knowing was the worst part. That little plastic stick in the guest bathroom wastebasket felt like a ticking clock. David was due over the next afternoon. He and Tom were going to put the finishing touches on the boat. I found myself dreading his arrival and at the same time desperately wanting to see him, to gauge his mood, to find some answers in his expression. Would he look happy? Anxious? Would he say something? He arrived right on time, whistling as he came up the porch steps. He poked his head into the kitchen where I was pretending to read a magazine, though I'd been staring at the same page for 10 minutes. "Afternoon, Melissa. Anything I can do to help before I get greasy with Tom?" His smile was as bright as ever, his eyes holding that familiar friendly sparkle. No sign of worry, no hint of hidden news. Just David. My carefully constructed composure threatened to crumble. How could he act so normal if this monumental thing was hovering in the air between us, or at least in my awareness? "No, nothing, David. Tom's out back. I think he's already started without you." My voice sounded almost steady. A small miracle. He winked. "Wouldn't be the first time. See you later." And off he went, his easygoing energy filling the space and then receding, leaving me once again with my churning thoughts. I couldn't stand it any longer. I had to know. But I couldn't just ask him, could I? "Hey, David, did Sarah happen to leave a pregnancy test in my guest bathroom?" It sounded accusatory, invasive. What if it had nothing to do with them? What if it was? I don't know. A friend of Tom's who'd stopped by when I was out? Unlikely, but possible. Later that afternoon, I heard Tom and David laughing in the backyard. The sound usually warmed me, but today it just amplified my unease. I made a decision. I'd check the test, just a quick peek. Then I'd know. And knowing surely would be better than this gnawing uncertainty. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slipped back into the guest bathroom. The house was quiet, save for the distant murmur of their voices. I reached into the bin, my fingers closing around the test. I took a deep breath and pulled it out, turning it over to look at the little window. And there it was, clear as day. The digital screen read, "Pregnant." A wave of something, relief, shock, washed over me. Pregnant. So it was real. Sarah was pregnant. David was going to be a father. That was wonderful news, wasn't it? This was what they wanted. But the why still loomed large. Why was the evidence here, in my house, discarded so carelessly? Why the secrecy? I was about to put it back when I noticed something else, something I'd missed in my initial flustered state. Tucked almost into the hollow end of the plastic casing, there was a tiny piece of paper, folded minutely. It was so small it looked like part of the manufacturing or a stray bit of fluff. My fingers, suddenly clumsy, fumbled to retrieve it. I unfolded the tiny square. There was handwriting on it. Small, neat, and definitely female. Just 2 words. "Help me." My blood ran cold. Help me. This wasn't a note of celebration. This wasn't an accidental oversight. This was a plea. And it was attached to a positive pregnancy test found in my house, likely connected to my brother-in-law. The implications spun wildly in my mind, each one more disturbing than the last. Was Sarah not happy about this? Was she scared? Was David? Did he even know? The innocent flirtation, the deep talks, the shared confidences. Everything took on a darker, more complex hue. This wasn't just about a baby anymore. This was about something far more complicated, and I was somehow, inexplicably, right in the middle of it. The image of David's smiling, carefree face from an hour ago felt like a cruel joke. What was really going on in his life and in Sarah's? And what, in God's name, was I supposed to do? The two words, "help me," echoed in my mind, a silent scream I couldn't ignore. This was no longer about just satisfying my curiosity. The little piece of plastic in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy, a tangible symbol of a hidden distress. My earlier agitation was nothing compared to the cold dread that now settled in my stomach. Sarah was pregnant, and she was asking for help. From whom? From me? By leaving this here? It was such a strange, desperate way to communicate. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub, my legs feeling unsteady. I had to think. My first instinct was to talk to David. But what if he didn't know about the note? What if Sarah hadn't told him how she was truly feeling? Confronting him might make things worse for her. And what about Sarah herself? Should I call her? Pretend I'd found the test and ask if it was hers. That felt clumsy, potentially embarrassing for her if she was trying to be discreet for reasons I couldn't yet fathom. The image of Sarah, sweet, shy Sarah, came to mind. She was always so quiet at family gatherings, often overshadowed by David's boisterous personality. But there was a kindness in her eyes, a gentleness. It was hard to imagine her in such turmoil that she'd resort to leaving a cryptic note in my bathroom. Unless she felt she had no one else to turn to. But why me? We were friendly, yes, but not deeply close. Or so I'd thought. Maybe David's recent confidences with me hadn't gone unnoticed by her. Maybe she'd see me as someone approachable, someone who listened without judgment. "She trusts you, Melissa," David had said. Perhaps that trust extended further than I knew. I had to talk to Sarah, directly. But how? I couldn't just call her and say, "I found your positive pregnancy test," and a cry for help in my guest bathroom. The very words sounded insane. I needed a plausible reason to see her, to talk to her alone. My mind raced, searching for an excuse. The annual church bake sale was coming up. I was supposed to be coordinating volunteers. Sarah had helped out last year. Perfect. I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm the frantic beating of my heart. I put the test and the tiny note back into the wastebasket, carefully arranging the tissues over them as before. It felt wrong to leave them there, but taking them felt like stealing a secret that wasn't mine to keep, only to acknowledge. Then I went to the kitchen and picked up my phone. My hands were still trembling slightly as I dialed Sarah's number. It rang 3 times, each ring stretching my nerves tighter. "Hello." Her voice was soft, a little hesitant, just as I remembered. "Sarah, hi, it's Melissa. Melissa Henderson." "Oh, Melissa. Hi, how are you?" There was a slight waver in her voice, or was I imagining it? "I'm doing well, thanks. Listen, I know this is a bit last minute, but I was working on the schedule for the church bake sale, and I remembered how much help you were last year. I was wondering if you might be free to lend a hand again, and maybe we could grab a coffee sometime this week to chat about it." There, casual, plausible. There was a pause. For a moment, I thought she might say no. "Oh, the bake sale," she said, her voice a little distant. Coffee sounds nice, Melissa. When were you thinking?" "How about tomorrow morning? Say 10 o'clock? My treat. We could go to that little place on Main Street, the Cozy Bean." "Okay," she said, a little brighter. "Okay, Melissa. Tomorrow at 10 sounds good." "Wonderful. I'll see you then, Sarah." "See you then. Bye." I hung up, my breath escaping in a shaky sigh. Step 1 was complete. Tomorrow, I would see her. Tomorrow, I hoped, I would understand. I prayed I could offer whatever help she so desperately seemed to need. The image of David's cheerful face, oblivious, flashed before me again. This was a tangled web, and I felt like I was walking into its very center. My quiet, predictable life had definitely taken a detour. And the "you won't believe what happened" part? I was beginning to think it was going to be far more poignant and far less sensational than any clickbait title could ever convey. It was about real people with real fears and a silent plea tucked away where it was hoped a sympathetic heart might find it. The next morning, the atmosphere at the Cozy Bean was just as its name suggested, warm, inviting, with the rich aroma of coffee and baked goods filling the air. It was usually a place that made me feel relaxed, but today my stomach was in knots. I spotted Sarah at a small table by the window, nursing a cup of tea. She looked pale, and there were faint shadows under her eyes. She managed a small smile when she saw me. "Melissa, hi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sarah, thanks for meeting me." I sat down, trying to offer a reassuring smile of my own. We ordered our coffees, and for a few minutes we made small talk. The weather, the upcoming bake sale, Tom's never-ending boat project. It was all terribly normal, terribly polite, while this huge unspoken thing hung in the air between us. Finally, as the waitress moved away after delivering our drinks, I decided I couldn't skirt around it any longer. I had to be gentle but direct. "Sarah," I began softly, leaning forward a little. "I need to tell you something. Yesterday I was tittying the guest bathroom at our place, and I found something in the wastebasket." Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. She didn't speak, just stared at me, her knuckles white as she gripped her teacup. "I found a pregnancy test, Sarah," I continued, keeping my voice low and steady. "And a little note with it." She visibly flinched. A flush crept up her neck, and her eyes darted away from mine, looking out the window at the people passing by on the street. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. I waited, letting her process. Letting her decide what to say or not say. When she finally spoke, her voice was so quiet I had to strain to hear her. I don't know what you're talking about." My heart sank a little. Denial. This was going to be harder than I thought. "Sarah," I said gently. The note said, "Help me." It was folded up very small. "I know it was you. And it's okay. Whatever it is, you can talk to me." Tears welled up in her eyes. She bit her lip, struggling for composure. One tear escaped and traced a path down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice choked. "I didn't know what else to do. I felt so trapped." I panicked. "Hey," I said, reaching across the table and placing my hand over hers. Her hand was ice cold. "There's nothing to be sorry for. Tell me what's going on, please." She took a shaky breath. "It's true. I'm pregnant." Another tear fell. "And I'm terrified, Melissa. Absolutely terrified." This wasn't the reaction I'd expected. David had sounded so hopeful, so ready. I'd assumed Sarah would be too, despite any natural anxieties. "Terrified of what, honey?" I asked. "Being a mother, it's natural to be a little scared." She shook her head, pulling her hand away from mine to fumble in her purse for a tissue. "No, not just that. It's David." "David?" My confusion deepened. "What about David? I thought you both wanted this." "He does," she said, dabbing her eyes. "He wants it so much. He talks about it all the time. How perfect it will be. How we'll be this perfect little family. Her voice was laced with a bitterness that surprised me. "And I do want a baby. I really do. But what, Sarah?" She looked at me then, her eyes filled with a raw, desperate honesty. "But I don't know if I want it with him." The confession hung in the air, stark and shocking. This was far beyond a simple case of new parent nerves. This was a crisis, a deep fissure in their marriage that I had been utterly oblivious to. David, the charming, attentive brother-in-law, the man who seemed to adore his wife. Sarah was saying she wasn't sure she wanted to have his child. The innocent flirtation, the camaraderie I'd shared with David, now felt complicated in a way I hadn't anticipated. Had I been a fool? Had I only seen the surface, the charming facade David presented to the world and to me? "Oh, Sarah," I breathed, my own heart aching for her obvious pain. "Why? What's wrong?" She took a deep, shuddering breath. He's not who you think he is, Melissa. He's not who anyone thinks he is." The story that then unfolded, piece by painful piece, over lukewarm coffee in that cozy little cafe, was indeed something I wouldn't have believed, and it changed everything. Sarah painted a picture of David that was almost unrecognizable from the man I thought I knew. The charm I'd found so endearing, she described as a tool for manipulation, a way to always get his way, to deflect any real emotional intimacy. His enthusiasm, she said, often morphed into an overbearing control, dictating her choices, her friendships, even her thoughts, subtly at first, then more overtly. "He wants a baby as an accessory," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion now, as if she'd recited these facts to herself 1,000 times. "Another thing to show off, to prove he has the perfect life. He doesn't see me, Melissa. Not really. He sees a role I'm supposed to play." My mind struggled to reconcile this with the David I knew, the one who'd sought my advice, who'd seemed so genuinely vulnerable when talking about fatherhood. Had that all been an act? Or was Sarah's perception clouded by her own unhappiness? It was hard to know. But the depth of her distress was undeniable. "When I found out I was pregnant," she continued, twisting the damp tissue in her fingers, "my first feeling wasn't joy. It was fear. Fear of being even more tied to him, more under his control. I felt like I was suffocating." "So, the note," I prompted gently. "Why did you leave it at our house?" I'd taken the test at home that morning. It was positive. David was ecstatic, immediately started calling his friends, planning nursery decorations. It was all too much. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I made an excuse, said I needed to run an errand. I just drove. I ended up near your house. I'd remembered David saying how much he talked to you, how you were so understanding. I don't know why. I just had this crazy impulse. I went in. The back door was unlocked. You were in the garden, I think. I used your bathroom, and I had to tell someone, somehow, that I wasn't okay. I scribbled that note. It was foolish, I know. I regretted it almost immediately. But I also hoped you might find it. You seem so strong, Melissa. So grounded. Strong, grounded. I felt like the earth was tilting beneath my feet. The David she described was a stranger, and yet there had been tiny moments, fleeting impressions over the years, that perhaps hinted at a more complex, even a darker side to him. A certain steel in his eyes when he was thwarted, a way of dismissing opinions that didn't align with his. I'd brushed them off, attributed them to his passionate nature. Had I been willfully blind because I enjoyed his attention, his innocent flirtation? The thought made me feel queasy. "Sarah, this is a lot to take in," I said, trying to keep my own emotions in check. "What do you want to do? What kind of help do you need from me?" She looked up, a fragile hope flickering in her tear-filled eyes. "I don't know. I really don't know. Part of me wants to run away. Part of me thinks maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe it's just hormones making me crazy. But then I think about bringing a child into this, and I just can't. Have you talked to David about any of this? About how you're feeling?" She gave a short, bitter laugh. "Talk to David? You can't talk to David. You listen to David. He'd just tell me I'm being silly, over-emotional. He'd charm me or bully me out of my feelings until I agreed with him. That's how it always works." The weight of her despair settled heavily in the small cafe. I thought of Tom, of our steady, sometimes boring, but always respectful marriage. The contrast was stark. "You're not alone in this, Sarah," I said firmly, meeting her gaze. "You're not. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. If you need a place to stay, if you need someone to talk to, if you need help figuring out your options, I'm here." A fresh wave of tears streamed down her face, but this time they seemed to be tears of relief as much as sadness. "Thank you," she whispered. "Oh, Melissa, thank you. You have no idea how much that means to me. What about your family? Your friends?" She shook her head. "My parents live so far away, and they adore David. They'd never understand. Most of my friends. David has a way of easing out anyone he doesn't approve of. I've become quite isolated." The picture was becoming clearer and more chilling. We talked for another hour. I mostly listened, letting her pour out the fears and frustrations she'd kept bottled up for so long. I didn't offer easy answers because there weren't any. But I offered her a safe space, a compassionate ear, and the unwavering promise of support. As we left the cafe, Sarah seemed a little lighter, her shoulders not quite as slumped. She hugged me tightly before we parted. "I'll call you," she said. "Soon." Walking back to my car, my mind was a turmoil of conflicting emotions. Anger at David, if what Sarah said was true. Deep sympathy for Sarah, and a profound sense of disillusionment. The man I thought was a charming friend, a brother, might be causing immense pain to his wife. The innocent flirtation now felt tainted, almost like a betrayal, though not in the way one might typically assume. It was a betrayal of perception, of trust in my own judgment. When I got home, Tom was in the driveway, proudly polishing the now gleaming old boat. David was beside him, laughing at something Tom had said. Seeing David's easy smile, hearing his carefree laughter, sent a shiver down my spine. It was like watching an actor play a part he knew very well. Was Sarah right? Was it all a carefully constructed facade? David waved at me, his usual cheerful greeting. "Hey, Melissa, come check out the sea serpent." Tom's finally named her. I forced a smile. "Looks great, thighs." My voice sounded hollow to my own ears. I couldn't look at David for too long. I made an excuse about needing to start dinner and hurried inside. The house, usually my sanctuary, felt different. The knowledge I now carried was a heavy burden. The pregnancy test, the note, they were just the tip of the iceberg. The real story was Sarah's silent suffering and the complex, perhaps dangerous, man she was married to. The "you won't believe what happened" part was still unfolding, and I had a sinking feeling the most difficult chapters were yet to come. My role, it seemed, was shifting from a casual confidant to something far more critical. I had to be strong for Sarah. I had to help her find her way. And I had to figure out how to navigate my own relationship with a man who might be very different from the person I thought I knew.